Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is a weekly podcast in which I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop, RPG, and surrounding space. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Kat Kruger. Hello.
Hello.
I was going to say,
nice to be here.
Thank you very much for joining me. I'm trying to switch up the cadence of my intro because I've done it so many times that I'm just like it's to a beat now, and I don't know. I need a way to kind of spruce it up a little bit. But each week I'll try something different. I'll put emphasis on different words. But I'm guessing you didn't come here to chat about podcast intros.
I mean, we could.
Yeah, and I feel again it would not be a good use of your time. So, for the people listening, in case for whatever reason they might not have heard of you and stuff like that, what sort of products, what sort of tabletop RPG stuff have you been making?
Well, I am primarily the dungeon master at D20 which is an actual play podcast. So I could actually talk to you for a very long time about podcasts and D&D. So some of the adventures that I write for that podcast wind up on DMsGuild. I'm definitely behind on posting that content, though, because I had a toddler within the past couple of years, and that slowed down my output in that regard.
Understandably so. Yeah. I don't know what it is about toddlers, but they tend to get in the way of things.
Yeah, not really sure. Wasn't expecting that. But other than that, I have written for Wizards of the Coast, Ghostfire Gaming, 2C Gaming, Baldwin Games, Adventures League, a whole bunch of other clients.
The entire gambit, the whole.
I also, so I'm a freelance game designer, so I've worked in tabletop as well. So I've worked on board games for Hasbro.
So I guess one of the questions I was going to ask then kind of is, so what was kind of your first product? What was the kind of first thing that you was maybe I want to give this a go. I want to kind of dip my toes in creating tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, it was D20 Dames. We got together, decided we were going to do this podcast, and I had the most experience as a dungeon master with maybe 10 sessions under my belt.
Eked out just in the lead.
So we decided we were going to do these mini adventures written by Sean Merwin and company for In Volo's Wake, because at the time Volo's Guide to Monsters had just come out, and we thought it would be a fun way to just start the podcast and then eventually get writing original content. After the first 3 prequel episodes, I decided, all right, I think I'm ready. I'm gonna write this. Yeah. So I wrote The Trouble at Chesnar Manor, and it basically takes place in Phandalin, so in the starter kit, where the Lost Mines of Phandelver happen. There's a manor called the Red Brand Manor, and at the end of that adventure, it's abandoned, and I took that as an opportunity for kobolds to take over. And
the ghost is Amanda's well, that's ghost territory right there. But no, I think kobolds is ghost times 2.
Well, there's this whole underground crevasse and area that I decided I would just have the kobolds take over and trap. So that was my first foray onto the DMsGuild. I've also written. I think prior to that, I had written Magic the Gathering Innistrad adventure.
Because they had was it Plane Shift?
Plane Shift, yeah. So unofficial, it was played at some conventions. My partner and I co-wrote it. And so I guess that was technically my first foray, but it didn't get published because it was just for convention play, just for funsies. But my very first DMsGuild product is The Trouble at Chesnar Manor, which is a lot of fun.
I'm kind of curious then, just because so is there anything that in the design of an adventure that kind of changes when you know it's going to be for a playcast? I'm curious if there's anything fundamental that you kind of have to design knowing it's not it's good for any table, but then it's also got to be entertaining to what I don't know.
Yes, it's really funny because when I write my outlines, the very first one that I wrote it like it was going to be an adventure for everyone. And then I learned from there that in an actual play, there's a lot of deviation, a lot of role playing. So I sort of have like my outline looks like it's partly the adventure, and then there's a whole bunch of notes that's D20 Dames specific, where I'm just going to erase that when I'm going to go publish it.
Well, I guess because there's always like I hear about anytime people take their adventure kind of like playtesting. In the case of like something cool happens in the playtesting that is just like, well, that's just going to be an adventure now.
Yes,
I imagine there's that aspect is that the playtesting is live and recorded.
absolutely. That is a huge benefit of having an actual play and running your adventures, because it's essentially your first play test, except it's live.
Is there not, again, does that not add like a lot of like stress to the situation? Because it's like you want the adventure to go well, but then it's like there's so many more factors to try. Like again, it feels like it's a trial by fire to see if the adventure holds.
I think because the Dames are so great at improv, like I've never really felt that anything. I've always felt really comfortable that no matter if there were going to be any flaws in it, that it would get covered up in improv. Yeah. And then I would just fix it in the documentation later.
So I guess if you don't mind me kind of saying then, what is like one of like, if you remember like any of the biggest changes from actually like having it on the playcast versus publishing it that you kind of had to like change?
Well, the very first one, Trouble at Chesnar Manor, they of course decided that they were going to ask for all the NPC names. There were 6 brothers that they needed to find, and I had named all the kobolds, but I didn't name all the brothers.
I mean, priorities, like kobolds, like you want to know a kobold's name more often than...
No, they did not. I had a whole like employees only room completely ignored. Their little nameplates were on their little... Nope, they asked for their brothers. But then that opportunity gave me an opportunity to fantasy rickroll them, so that was a bonus.
I think as long as you get your dues as DM, I suppose it'll kind of works out in the end.
Yeah, I think that was like the first taste of how things run differently. So I decided I wasn't actually going to name anyone, and I just left it to the DM. Just roll on one of those fantasy generator tables. Yeah.
So I guess as well. So again, looking kind of everything you've kind of done, there's kind of been predominantly like predominantly adventure writing. Would you say that's kind of accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. A lot of my work has been adventure writing. I've written for D20 Dames, for Wizards. I did have an official Magic the Gathering plane shift for Ixalan.
Ooh, nice. Dinosaurs.
That was a lot of fun. Did D&D Nerds recently, that collaboration.
I was gonna say, because I must admit, it's kind of been fascinating watching all like social media around the like D&D Nerds, where there are people like I've been buying nothing but nerds, and they're never the D&D ones. I keep buying packets, and they're just not the right ones. So I just have all these nerds around my house.
Oh no. Yeah, I guess it's only the chewy nerds, a very specific chewy nerd, and like the nerds rope that are the D&D packaged ones.
I think I don't think they've made their way UK side. So again, I just have to. Nerds. I don't think they're a UK thing. I don't think I could just. But again, don't quote me. It may be the case where I have to go like scouring for them.
Sure.
But if I understand it correctly, the kind of the adventures kind of tie in. They're essentially. It's. I don't want to like not aimed at like a younger audience. Is that like appropriate? Like, or is it still?
I would say, generally speaking, my content is family friendly. There are definitely exceptions. Some anthologies that I've written for, like Uncaged and Unbreakable, they veer into the sort of dark horror scape. I also have an upcoming Ravenloft Adventures League adventure coming out for the Mistwalkers series. and that's also dark.
So was it quite, I guess, like, was it quite challenging then for like the Nerds Project to kind of tone that back, or was it the case of like, I don't know, we're gonna get spooky with these nerds? Or
No. I mean, I think it's because like I've got, those are my two favorite sort of topics, is like doing the family friendly content and then doing like dark horror. So I think in my brain it just like splits, and it's really great because I think I'm able to create a little bit more because I have the two spaces rather than just, you know, completely family friendly.
Yeah, it's a case of anyone reads your adventures, they're not expecting every corridor to have some weird, I don't know, flesh amalgam, or like it's like, oh great, it's one of these rooms. There's one in every adventure. It's yeah. No, I there is like small things like that. So like in all the kind of like adventures I write, like it is hard to kind of resist the edge of like sometimes it's naming conventions. Like I have like characters that kind of like recur, or like, you know, like names that kind of like, oh, you know, you have the Winter Blitz family of like less than somewhat fumbling wizards that kind of show up and cause, they come up, they some descendant shows up to kind of cause havoc. Do you have any kind of like, I guess I don't know, like calling card? Is that the
I think I would probably say because of the live shows that D20 Dames, the ones that we do are typically pop culture themed. So I draw a lot of inspiration from movies and video games and other, I guess, non-fantasy elements. So when we do a live show, it takes place at Emerald Forest Adventure Con, which is an adventure convention. And I always use some sort of like parody of something. So we've done like Untitled Goose Game, The Fast and the Furious, Inception.
quite a diverse range. So you maybe go from Goose Game to fun. Yeah. Yes. I kind of want to see like the Venn diagram of like where those two overlap, but I'm sure it's going to be some weird
yeah.
No, interesting, and yeah, I guess it's kind of like, so when you kind of go in and say, okay, well, I want this to kind of be like a Need for Speed styled kind of like adventure, or like, you know, is it kind of like you want to put that like that theme in the forefront, or do you kind of want it to be that thing of like you do it sneakily and then the shoe drops where it's like, are we Fast and Furiousing it right now?
I think it's usually, yeah, the shoe drops at some point, because there is like a buildup of like, okay, what's it gonna be this time? So yeah, there's like a bit of an intro, and then when it happens, you know what it is. You know, like I did a night at the museum type one in an actual museum, because we were there was a D&D museum exhibit, and the D20 Days were actually part of we were in the exhibit, which was really cool. And they asked us to do a live show there, so I went really meta and decided I was going to do a night at the museum.
Was it the case where they got you like there at like midnight, like past like all the lockdown? It was.
They went to a pop-up museum at Emerald Forest Adventure Con, and they were helping out a recurring NPC who's just got all these jobs at the convention, and he was the night watchman, and the main foyer had the bones of a dragon instead of a dinosaur. And
nice. What is it? There's the famous like Diplodocus skeleton at like the I think it's pretty it's one of the museums where they've nicknamed it Dippy the Diplodocus, and I think it's not in the UK at the moment. I think they have like a program where they send it around the world. Get everyone see.
Okay, yeah. Sue the T-Rex is another one in Chicago. Yeah,
that's yeah. No, I can definitely see a T-Rex being like a Sue. So I guess I'm kind of more curious then. So, what was it about? I guess like out of again. D&D or the tabletop RPGs in general, they have like so many different like facets. Like you can do like subclass design, you can do kind of like, what was there any kind of like any particular part of you that was like, I just like adventures, or like telling those kind of stories? Or
I think it's because I came to it as a like my professional training before becoming a TTRPG designer was I have a degree in public relations.
Okay.
I was an arts journalist and social media manager for a while, and then I was a young adult author for a few years. And I think it's because of the storytelling element that really drew me into D&D. I've taught some D&D like workshops and camps. And I think it's that collaborative storytelling that I really love. And I have worked on other things more recently now that I'm more comfortable with D&D. So I've done some monster stat block work with Ghostfire Gaming. So I did the work on the Monster Grimoire, and I've also worked on the Venture Maidens book as well, coming out from 2C Gaming, and did some monsters there as well.
I guess there's like the reason why I always say that I quite like adventure writing is because you do get to be like a little greedy. It's like you get to do a little bit of everything. Like if you want a monster design, you can. You just kind of like say, oh, I need this very bespoke monster in.
Yes.
There's even been like one adventure where I was like, this needs a subclass. Like this, I don't. I'm sorry. I just need like I'm creating this this. I was creating a stat block that was basically a cleric, and it's like, well, I mean, if I'm going to create a monster that can do all this stuff, might as well let her play it. And yeah, it's easy to get that kind of feature bloat of like, well, I just add this kind of. But one thing I always kind of like to ask with like adventure writers in particular is, what is your kind of approach to adventure writing? Do you think you're more kind of like you find kind of set pieces to kind of work between, or are you more about kind of like a more living, breathing location in which kind of there's like what's the word that I'm looking for? More like random events to kind of occur within this kind of exciting space, or is it kind of like a trail?
It's a little bit of both. I do like writing, the locations and having the opportunity to explore. I think I do try to focus more on the, not necessarily just combat. I really do like focusing on the role play and exploration elements as well. So yeah, the locations and I think NPCs are probably my favorites.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was not very comfortable with creating monster stat blocks until recently. So that's a new to me sort of thing. But yeah, random encounters, I put them in sparingly, I think.
I think the way I kind of use them, if going to have to, is anytime I know that there's going to be like a long amount of travel time. But then again, the kind of important part is to not, again, they're called random encounters, but you design what they are, so they shouldn't be random in that sense.
Yeah.
Like they should in some way add to, like it's a case of like if you're going like, I don't know, like to somewhere that's perilous, you should be able to find like, oh, here's someone who like a skeleton of an adventurer who tried, and you kind of pick up something from that way, or but. And then every now and then there's always gonna be one where she's like, I just want to get this pun in there that I just like 1 out of 6. I'm allowed 1 out of 6 puns. It's just kind of with the table.
Puns. I just have to say, my most recent live show was at Gen Con with the James, and I just have to say this because so I created, we've got Ravenloft. I created the domain of bread. Because
okay, I mean, what I mean, where can you go from there? It's like that's is everything like, is it the case of like you go that everything's made out of bread, like to the floor, or is it just like everyone's baking enthusiastics?
Well, it's really funny because the Dames have this ongoing sort of bit where they named this, like in the Trouble at Chesnar Manor, when they were going through it
all the way back.
All the way back, like 4 seasons now. They picked up this piece of petrified bread.
Okay, so yeah, no, I mean, yeah, you kind of
and then they named it a Chet. So then I made the Dark Lord of this domain Chet,
Is
And
it actually the same bread, or just coincidence that it is?
I didn't actually tell them what, like, they didn't actually get to meet Chet at the
Okay.
end. But yeah, it was just, yeah, puns
So
are
it's there in the
definitely.
background, just waiting for the kind of surprise. Wow. Yeah. So the domain of bread. It's but that's what I mean. It's like you always like you do like sometimes I do have those kind of like the 1 a.m. note, like you wake up in a fugue state where you just like I grab my phone, I need to type in an idea. And I feel like domain of bread probably would be one of those.
Absolutely. So I have our producer is also, she plays an NPC that so I have somebody to actually talk to about ideas, which is great. And really what happened was like a month ago or a month and a half ago, I said, okay, I have this really wild idea. I need you to tell me if it's too out there. and it's just like all I had was domain of bread. And she was like, yes.
That's all you need. So then I guess kind of so more generally, so when you kind of let's follow this breadcrumb trail as far as it goes. when you come to like say you have like one of these ideas and it's your time to kind of sit down and essentially like write an adventure, whether it is for the DM Dames or just generally, is there kind of like a set structure that you kind of go from start to finish, or like I'm just curious about like what your process is.
My process is very, very messy. I am absolutely fly by the seat of your pants sort of designer. I'm like that as a writer as well. I basically come up with a few key ideas, and then from there I think about what the plot is and what the story thread is, and what the goal of the adventuring party would be. But yeah, it's very often just like this one sentence or this one idea, and it's like it builds from around that.
I must admit, so in the kind of like adventure writing that I find the easiest kind to write are ones where it's essentially like almost like a trail adventure where the party are going from place to place to place.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that I kind of the ones that I find myself consistently writing that it's just a headache in itself is the one where it's one location over like a timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And it's again like being locked in a museum overnight, and it's a case where it's not necessarily about running it, it's being able to convey like a same environment that is changing without kind of repeating the kind of information and yeah, I'm kind of I've got like again so you know how you said about like the adventure convention which is like I've got an idea for a monster convention
nice.
where essentially there is it gets sort of kind of like locked down, as it turns out one of the monsters within the monster convention is really what it looks like. So a bunch of people are in costume, and like it's the party where while within the kind of this convention they have to kind of engage in, I guess, like I don't know, my mind is like there'll probably be like a costume competition. Where, and that's kind of like one of the set pieces, but the location isn't changing. It's just there's kind of going to be like these series of events that and again, if had it not been locked down, that it's easier if like they had to go a bunch of different places. It's just I don't know if that was less of a question, more of me just ranting.
Sometimes it is like you need to contain where they do this, because otherwise it just gets too big.
Well, I guess like, so are there kind of any kind of like rules of thumb or like general guidance that you try and like do, like every time you sit down to write an adventure, you're like, I need to keep these kind of golden rules in mind? Or
oh my goodness, I don't know. I think it depends on the project that I'm working on, because I think when it comes to like the Nerds one was so unique because it was geared towards one DM, one solo player, and it had to be family friendly. So it's like, okay, so we're going to sit down, we're going to probably not have a lot of combat.
Flesh golem goes out the window. It's like,
yeah. Yeah, so it's in that regard, like I really needed to think about like the story and what the what each nerd represents, and how best to bring that theme out in each adventure through their class and their whatever
kind of duet format as well is kind of particularly challenging, because it's again, it kind of almost throws kind of conventional balancing out the window.
Absolutely.
There
are a lot of notes about what happens if the monsters are if you don't want to necessarily TPK your single player, right? So what do you do in that instance? So there's a lot of direction in something like that, versus like for Adventurers League, not as much direction in that regard, because you're sort of expecting that the dungeon master and the players have a better understanding of how D&D works.
But then I guess you're kind of working to like the different restrictions in terms of like it's you're playing with like I guess like a strict time session in mind.
Yes.
It becomes that case of like, well, okay, I want to include this stuff, but then I need to kind of, again, built into the adventure itself, you need to like include this if you've got time. If not, skip it, in case, it's funny how, like, again, just between the few different formats, how much you can kind of tweak. If you don't mind saying, oh, sorry, no, were you into?
I think that is one of the things I do consider, though, is the time, the amount of time that each adventure is going to play. So I think that helps with figuring out how many words or how many pages it's going to be.
So was it? I think RP Davis once kind of was talking to me about it, that his rule of thumb is always, he says, about 45 minutes. Like if you have an encounter, 45 minutes is generally the leeway. Like especially if it's like combat or anything.
Yes.
if you're putting like a closed door in front of the party, maybe double that time.
Depends on how many chats they have.
Yeah. But I did want to kind of ask, like, so if you're, again, I don't know the kind of agreement you have with nerds, but what was? Can you talk a little bit about what adventure you actually included, or?
I think because they're out now, I can talk about that. So each of the nerds had a class assigned to them. So Pink, for example, is a rogue. And that's the first adventure that shows up. That's probably the one that most people have played by now. And it's it was essentially going into a cave system and searching for a hidden item on behalf of a key NPC that plays throughout all the little mini adventures.
So is it the fact that with the Pink rogue nerd, which is a weird saying, is it the idea that's like a pre-generated character, or is it kind of? It
does have a character sheet.
was that something that you kind of have to put together as well? It's like, okay, well, what's the character sheet of a Pink nerd rogue?
No, I didn't actually do that part. Okay, there was a team that I was able to work with, which was wonderful. So I did like the main story building and design work, and then Adam Lee did a lot of the development work, and then my partner Chris Tulloch did the character sheets.
So no, fair. It's yeah. No, I must admit, I do like the kind of I was got duet format, but I was about to try and say the D duet.
Oh yeah.
Or like whatever. But it's I think I would just struggle, because obviously one of the problems that can come up in adventures is obviously like when you put things behind skill checks, or you have any like certain sort of DCs. Unless the kind of the duet format is like, okay, this is an adventure designed for this particular character, I think it's hard to kind of avoid some of those, like, well, it's not hard, but it's one of the challenges that to avoid those kind of typical roadblocks that, like, oh, my character just can't do the thing that you're kind of expecting them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this case, you're right. Like it the adventure was written specifically for this one character, so that they're going to be skilled at X number of things. But there's also, because it is for beginners, there's a lot of like DM notes on making it a little bit easier for especially a younger player. So, if they failed in this regard, maybe an NPC helps and assist them to get the answer some other way.
It's not like Team of Annihilation Meat Grinder, where it's like, oh, that's another nerd dead. I know, it's like the thing that immediately comes to mind is like sort of like like gummy bears. Like the idea,
Yes.
like you have like the gummy bear tokens and just eating them each time. So then I guess nerds aside, which is not something I've said too often in my life. Across the kind of your design process as a whole, like, do you have like a favorite part and like a least favorite part?
I think my favorite part is the idea generation and like working on the NPCs. Like I really love coming up with like unique plot points and fun NPCs to interact with. But ironically, I feel like my least favorite part is actually writing the first draft. Like just all of it. Yeah, I just find it really difficult to write the first draft. And then after, I love doing revisions. And it's the same when I write books. It's like that first draft is just takes so long and I'm thinking about it too long and I want it to be over, but
yes. See, it's funny because me sometimes it's almost a little flipped. It's sometimes I like when I get caught in the revisions, and sometimes that's a part of like where I'm just like, oh, this why did I even do a first draft if this is what I'm having to like? I have shoddy clay that I now have to kind of flamber. But at that point, I'm just kind of endlessly thankful for any sort of editors to kind of just smooth over that process where I can see the sea of red, and I'm like, yeah. You're right on that one. Yep. And kind of but no, I kind of wanted to kind of I guess dig a little deeper about like kind of the way you approach character design. Is it so I guess is it the case of like you kind of assess that okay, an adventure needs an NPC for this kind of situation? Is there anything that you kind of like do you gravitate towards like identify like a sort of personality trait first, or maybe like a particular image in your mind, or does it kind of
I think there's a personality that goes with each adventure that, I feel like, all right, in this situation, what would be the most helpful thing? Or sometimes it's like, a little bit of an antagonistic NPC and what would be least helpful.
Yeah.
But I think it depends on the type of information that the NPC is required to have. So if it's like very nefarious sort of information, then it probably comes from a little bit more of a sketchy character.
I was gonna say, so off the top of your head, are there any kind of characters that like you're like I like that one? I keep coming back to this kind of character.
Recently I wrote for the Dungeoncraft spotlight for the stuff that came out for the Domains of Delight and the Witchlight Carnival. And that was very heavily inspired by Alice in Wonderland. So I have a white herringon named Hairspring. And basically it's White Rabbit as your guide in this Domain of Delight. And I really like I like that character because I got to play off of a classic but make it fantasy Feywild White Rabbit. So
what were some of the ways that you kind of like I turned out to 11? It was
so he's a royal artificer.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you've done it. That's all.
Yeah, he because it's a clockwork domain, so it's clockwork and Feywild.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I gave him because Herringon all have a little quirk. I gave him a little quirk, and his is that he can't lie without twitching his nose.
This is adorable now.
Yeah.
Wait, so but does that mean he lies a lot? Is he like, or is it just?
I feel like things like that sometimes I leave up to the DM. Like I put in that he's like a happy helper as one of his key features. So, but whether or not he lies is.
Yeah. No, I must say, so in the few parts I really like about like character like writing, especially when it comes to like the personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws, just because again, the moment you kind of get to kind of speak in that character's voice, and those times where I've done like a sort of like a Tasha's style document where you get to add those like little quips throughout the
Yes.
they're so much fun. It's I don't know why, but you always have to put yourself in like I'm a broody wizard. I'm a broody wizard, and then you just go and scene, and then you just go. It's yeah. So again, I think about 60% of the stuff I do has those notes kind of scattered throughout.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah. So I guess you kind of mentioned then the kind of least favorite part of your process kind of being that that first
writing.
the writing. No, so I don't know. So I recently did, so with all the kind of interviews that I've kind of done, I did like a special kind of year in review where I kind of collated all the responses down. And yeah, I think I found that depending on who I spoke to, writers, they don't like the start, they don't like the middle, and some of them don't like the end. So I can confidently and scientifically prove that writers, they don't like writing. But I was going to ask is like, have you kind of found any kind of any way to kind of get through that first stage, or is it kind of just
I was writing 2 playlists for a while. I feel like I need to get back into doing that. It's just I feel like when I have a playlist to listen to on repeat, it really gets me in the mood to write this.
Is it so basically like kind of you go through a project thinking what songs kind of align with this project, or is it no, okay, I thought it was just like a playlist of absolute bangers that you just go, this is just
nope. I curate it so that it is songs that I would imagine sort of playing in the background as I'm running through the adventure.
I imagine so. Did you think that an aspect of that kind of stems from obviously running actual play? Because obviously I know that you kind of do have the kind of access to kind of ambient sounds and stuff in the background that you kind of, again, I'm sure there are actual plays in silence, but it's nice to have a little bit of ambient music in the kind of background. So yeah. Sorry, no, go ahead.
We actually don't play music while we're recording because we do a little bit of editing on ours, but then the ambient music comes after in production.
Okay, so but then you kind of still need to kind of pass the kind of music along.
Yeah.
So then I guess kind of do you think there's any other ways that like your design process has kind of been inspired by again running an actual play podcast?
I do think that because the NPCs are so important in an actual play, that I've developed that a little bit more, and I try to insert certain types of NPCs in my design work.
So is it in the fact that your players kind of respond a certain way to kind of
absolutely.
So what's the sort of character? Is it like, again, is it the case of where you just put someone who's like overwhelmingly attractive, or just like they wear like really large hats that you just know they're gonna like, what is there any particular trait?
Usually it is someone who's not quite incompetent, but like really is eager to do their job, but isn't necessarily doing it well.
The person where you just watch them for a bit and go, oh, bless you. Oh, it's but I there is something to it though, because I imagine it's like if this is an NPC who needs help, there is something about that caricature that just makes you go, just let me help. Let me let me kind of step in.
Yes.
And it's kind of it's kind of interesting to kind of get those kind of like those like it's quite easy to kind of get characters kind of to kind of dislike a player just by making them kind of snobbish. Like that that's the go-to one of like, if their first remark is a snobbish remark, people are like, okay, I don't like you anymore. Whereas if they're lovable but bumbling.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an easy hook there. Like I can't imagine too many adventuring parties would be like, all right, we're just gonna combat through this and not help this guy.
I don't know. Now I'm trying to think of like the design thing of like someone doing their job too well. I don't know if like if anyone's gonna you don't need help, but clearly something is going, like there's something going on. Something's not right. Like
yeah. I think that makes them very suspicious right off the bat, because it's like you're doing your job well, but what's going on now?
Yeah, there needs to be a problem here that I'm here to solve, and right now you're fixing them. The one that I try my best to kind of get into like my home games that I want to kind of do more work into is rival adventuring parties.
Yeah.
But again, not rival, and again, it's that borderline between like they're not antagonistic. They're not, you don't want to fight them, but they're just annoying. They're sort of like, it's always fun when you like introduce the party where it's like it is a reflection of them, but just off, or in the opposite direction where you can kind of see the parallels. Those always go down well.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of more generally then. So across everything that you've kind of written, would you say there's any kind of particular design choice that you can kind of point to that you're quite kind of proud of?
I think my most recent release, the A Stitch in Time, which is the Alice in Wonderland one, I really feel like I pushed myself design-wise on that one, because in the Witchlight there is a section that basically says, you can essentially go through this entire campaign without combat.
Yeah.
I thought that's a really great challenge. And I thought that I was pretty well suited to it, because on the podcast, the dames typically use words over swords. So, nice. So I figured I would really lean into that. And I think I tried to go into like the Dungeon Master's guide and take a look at some of the optional non-combat things that could possibly happen. And one of the things was I decided that etiquette was going to be very important in this world, because the Archfey is basically like the Queen of Hearts.
Yeah.
And there's spoilers for anybody who wants to play it, but there's like a trial at the end. So the character's actions throughout the 4-hour adventure are kind of quietly being judged.
I like that. Yeah.
So I decided that first of all there would be etiquette, and they would be like the denizens of the Feywild would either have a positive or negative interaction with them based on that. And so I have like the starting etiquette are these 3 or 4 things, and one of them is like it's the height of rudeness to speak a word that starts with the letter H, especially hello, because it has hell in it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fair. Yeah. I like all that kind of like that face stuff. I'm playing a satyr in one like a home game, and yes. my favorite thing to do is start every conversation with can I have your name? and just like immediately every time the rest of my party are like no
yeah.
But no, I do like that, and it's kind of that case of like gets across how kind of not whimsical that the Feywild is. It's kind of that case of like
well, and in this case, because time it's a clockwork world, so it's literally 3 layers of a clock that they're living on, and it's got moving parts, and time works differently. So I decided like, well, etiquette could change really quickly in this world because time is moving at a different pace. So I used the sowing rumors from Downtime as something you can actually do within minutes in the Feywild. So you can change the etiquette so that at the end of the adventure, if you had a faux pas, you could possibly change the etiquette so that it's no longer against you.
That's incredible. Wow. I mean, in fact, like that's literally the only sort of thing that you can do with time manipulation. That's So I'm kind of curious. So what were like some of the other, like, I guess the ways you kind of go about making a kind of adventure non-compact centric is obviously by putting potentially like environmental hazards, as you kind of mentioned before, the kind of words over swords, which
Yes.
I like that kind of. What did you think was kind of like, I guess the I guess more generally, like, what did you think was cool?
This adventure, I really liked leaning into a lot of the non-combat stuff. So like I have speaking of random encounters, they get to one level where the random encounters are essentially as a DM, if they hit a dead end, you pull cards from the deck of many things.
Okay.
It does not trigger the effect. Rather, it creates a monodron in the shape of a medium-sized card, just like in Alice in Wonderland, with a head and legs and feet. Yeah. And this random encounter essentially is a living card based on the deck of many things that requires either assistance or, in a couple instances, there's a possible combat.
Wow. No, I like it because, like, in so many ways, you so clearly leaned into like the inspiration behind like Alice in Wonderland, but as well as kind of grounding it and kind of uniquely blending it with like the D&D lore. Because when she said deck of many things, I got scared. I was like, oh no, where's this going?
Where is this going? I thought it was non-combat.
Yeah, it's like it's non-combat, but there's like a 1 in like 20 chance that you may just die. Oh wow, no fair. No, so and
yeah,
well,
and I also did I did a chessboard as well. So I did dragon chess, and if you don't move the way that your assigned chess piece moves, you get teleported back to the beginning. But then, you can also sort of montage it and do skill checks so that if, say one of the queen's pieces comes and lands on your piece to capture you, you can make a stealth roll to avoid capture.
Nice. It's kind of like, you're like, we're kind of cheating, but it's like, it's yeah. So I'm curious as well. So obviously you've done, again, a good amount of writing for like Adventure League. As well with the new system, it's like the Dungeoncraft.
Yes.
I'm just curious, how have you found kind of working with, because again, it's still all kind of Adventure League, but again, there's kind of like been different seasons where the rules have kind of shifted. How do you find working with the Dungeoncraft system?
Like Dungeoncraft was really great. It was really one of the highlights of collaborative work. And I've been on some really great projects. Wow. It was really great because it was there were 9 of us in the program. Mm-hmm. We all collaborated, discussed things like, what are we going to do for the cover art? And, there was a lot of like hands-on stuff that went into it, a lot of sharing of knowledge so that there was similarities in formatting. We did get like a template, but we also, talked about, how we were going to arrange the content and what sorts of extra things we would put into it. So it was wonderful.
Was it the covers or the layout as well? Was it about? Is it Gordon McAlpin?
Yeah, Gordon did the sort of frame treatment on the covers. Nice. Yeah, and then the interiors. That was, I think each person did their own layout, but it was based on an Adventures League template.
Nice, kind of keep things consistent. No, yeah. Wow, yeah, and because obviously this is like the first kind of season of the Spotlight system, like and stuff like that. So it's it's kind of exciting to kind of again kind of it's particularly timed with like the new release of the books, and again these kind of a whole host of adventures. Because is again, correct me if I'm wrong, is there any kind of like thread kind of, or like kind of thread kind of, or is it because I guess you have that benefit of like all these being kind of like domains of delight, that they are kind of very much like standalone?
They are standalone, yeah. They all have their own unique Fey crossing and theme, and that was another great thing, because when we were talking about it originally, everybody just we dropped our ideas into the Discord, and everybody came up with these very unique worlds. I think the only one I think I can't remember, Jackie Loong's his domain is also Clockwork, but it's a toy maker world.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
there's I'm sure, like, was it I was going to say something about like a broken clock strikes twice, but like in like the good way, like. I think that was a bad analogy. I apologize. So to recover, I'm going to segue into the next question. So generally, kind of across everything you've done, then is there like a particular point that you can point to? That you kind of a lesson that you'd wish you'd learned kind of earlier.
I think the lesson that I learned early, like it was early on, was with that Innistrad adventure that I wrote. I think I ran it for a few years later, or maybe a year later after I wrote it, and I already had a few more adventures out at that point, and I went back to run it, and I thought, my goodness, why are there so many NPCs? this is like a 2-hour adventure. I don't even know. I lost count of how many NPCs there are. So I feel like I learned early on, even though like my background is in PR and journalistic writing, so I already had like concise writing down, which I think is really important. But it was the whole idea of less is more. Where you can have one NPC instead of 5, that would be great.
Yeah. I'm going through like a kind of like a gazetteer style document for like a project at the moment, where it is kind of it sometimes leans on the more side of when you're trying to give like like, oh, look at all these locations and stuff like that. And again, as you kind of said yourself, like it's fun to create NPCs. It's like don't stop me from having fun. I'm just going to put like 2, maybe 3 more NPCs in there. Yeah, no, that's fair. And yeah, I think in the same way, like sometimes in terms of like locations, sometimes it can be easy to kind of like look at like kind of again, like if it is a building or like with X number of rooms, it's like, do you need all the rooms? Can some of these rooms be merged? Are they offering something distinct enough or to kind of
absolutely
conciseness is key, which I feel like is the use of too many words. Be concise.
Be concise.
Be concise. No, awesome. Well, then, and you kind of, as we kind of been chatting, you've kind of mentioned again a good amount of kind of like working on, I guess, like all manner of kind of collaborations and everything. I'm just kind of curious then, is if there's like a number of people who kind of you look to in the tabletop RPG industry as kind of particularly inspiring.
Absolutely. This is a hard question because there's so many. I would have to start with the dames on D20 Dames. Jen Vaughn and Jess Ross are also designers, really fantastic designers. And I feel like because we're so close and tight-knit and work together, like I feel like we're constantly like learning and inspiring each other, which is really great. And
also, the fact that they are your playtest group in one way or another.
Yeah, that too. Banana Chan is really awesome too. Celeste Konowich, I think, yeah. And like starting off pretty early on in my career, I got to work with Sean Merwin, and I've been able to work with him recently as well. He just has so much knowledge, and him and Teos Abadea are fantastic. I've watched them and learned a lot from them.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, their podcast is like an endless source of like inspiration and knowledge. It's like, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. Yeah, I must admit, I need to work on my segue from that question, because I'm always like, yeah, those people are great, and then it's like, but looking at the time cap, we've just about done it.
Okay.
It happens, you blink. This is like a stitch in time. Time works differently here. We sowed some rumors at the start, and now we're here to reap what we sow. But obviously, one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to leave without kind of hearing kind of what some of the interesting stuff that you're working on at the moment that you can talk about.
That I can talk about.
and kind of tagging onto that is like, where can people stay up to date about your work and all that?
All right. Right now I'm working on some things for 2C Gaming and Ghostfire Gaming. I'm also working on a project with Jen Vaughn, which should be out in October.
This time is wibbly wobbly here. We don't know for sure when things
yeah.
are
now that I've said it though, it's gonna happen, right? October and November. I can't remember that what it's timing with a D&D book release. So those are the things I can talk about, and I can't even specify what it is exactly that I'm talking about.
I like it. It's kind of the big level of things and stuff.
Redacted things.
and yeah, where can people stay up to date?
I have a website, steampunkunicornstudio.com. That is my freelance game design business. It's pretty much where you can find all my links there for social media and getting in touch with me. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I was impressed by your website. It's again the case of like, anytime I see someone's portfolio, I'm like, I really should update mine. it's like, oh, damn, this one's shiny and eye catching, and then mine's still like a year out of date. So, but no, honestly, Kat, thank you so much for taking some time to sit down and I've been standing, but have this chat. It's been delightful.
Thank you. It's been lovely.
Otherwise, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. And the Gazetteer that I was talking about, it's not out yet, like as a recording, but I'm confident that it will be out by I'm putting my foot in it, which is the Long Saddle Gazetteer. So you've heard of the famous ranching town based in Forgotten Realms. It's got wizards. It's got cowboy. It's got cowboy wizards. Nice. What more do you need? And so yeah, it's a beefy document. There's a lot of stuff in it, and there'll be a link to that in the description. But my favorite part of the podcast, and arguably the most important part, is I'm at a loss, Kat. I don't know how to end the podcast. Do you have any suggestions, perchance?
Well, the way that we say it at D20 Dames is, until next time, misadventure awaits.